All right, welcome back to Jeff Koinange live here at Citizen Television, one-on-one with Amollo Otiende, Senior Counsel, Member of Parliament, Rarieda. And yes, he was the face of the Supreme Court in the last petition. Not now. I'm about to ask him whether he misses being in the court. Before I do that, by the way, you can tweet us at O Amollo. There you go, at O Amollo. At Koinange Jeff, the hashtag JKLive. Real quick, we're talking about the notes earlier on, and you'll talk about July 16, 2010. Fine.
Yes.
I think the central bank had said it was going to change the notes. It was going to change the face of the notes. What is it? Is there no money? Are they waiting for the right tender? I mean, they do want to eventually put, like South Africa, where they have the big five, they put some landmarks or monuments or whatever. Why do you think that they haven't?
My own view on that matter, and on a number of other matters I could talk about, is impunity. I think it is intentional circumvention of the Constitution, where the Constitution says this, but operatives find a way of defeating it. There can be no explanation whatsoever why 7 years after promulgation of the Constitution, you have failed to comply with it. In the timelines of the Constitution, the longest timeline was 3 years. Now, this is 7 years. That is outrageous. There can be no rational explanation. Whatever explanation one would have, it cannot be about cost, because they are printing new notes. It cannot be about logic or reason, unless one is hoping to extend this long enough so that that constitutional provision is changed. The other time I was discussing with my friend Wamatangi, and his view was that that is one of the sections of the Constitution that he would like changed, unless the central bank is of a similar view. But that is an erroneous view. Once the Constitution is adopted in a referendum by as big a margin as was, you must implement it to the latter.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate. What's the big deal? It's legal tender, it's currency. What's the big deal?
The big deal is that the people of Kenya spoke through that Constitution. Whether you agree or not, you are bound to respect it. And every single state officer swears to uphold, respect, and apply the Constitution. And they must do that. Okay,
let's switch gears. Supreme Court, day one was today. And I noticed the decorum, the body language, the grandstanding was very low-key. I don't know if you noticed the same thing. It's not like when you were there a month or two ago. Why is that, you think?
Well, I think you know the answer, Jeff.
What, you're not there?
No, not at all. The main political player in any of these things is Raila Amollo Odinga. Once he's not involved, once he pulled out of the 26th October elections, once he chose, therefore, not to challenge the results because he does not recognize them, once he is not a player, the juice in it just disappears. And you'll have noticed it's not just even a question of the grandstanding. Even the court attendance, it's almost an empty court with only lawyers. You know, that was not the case the other time. Indeed, you will notice that even the Jubilee politicians who are scrambling to get access to the court the other time are not doing so now. Why?
Maybe they're tired. Maybe they have, it's this time around, they've had enough. They've had enough of sitting there all day, every day.
No. You can never have enough of the right thing. It is because the sweetness of the Supreme Court challenge is only there if the main challenger, in this case Raila Amollo Odinga, is involved. Once he was not involved, he did not participate, and to cap it all, the petitioners in this case joined NASA. The Supreme Court, in its wisdom, released NASA from the proceedings, and therefore, it all became rather dry. Even I've noticed that even your own reporters are kind of short of the things to report. It's kind of dry, and some of the proceedings are not even, they're not beamed live. I've noticed some of the stations going on to, Al Mujahideen and other funny stuff. That is the reason. If Raila was involved and if he was in court, there would be electricity.
I'll make sure I tell Francis Gashuri and Sam Gituku that you just said they're a little dry. But at the same time, so is this a foregone conclusion then? Are you saying it's over?
I'm not saying it's over, but I'm saying there are a number of things that have changed. When we lodged the petition in August, First, there was an air of neutrality, okay? There was an air of expectation. And for this time, a number of things have happened since that time. Our Supreme Court, which at the moment, as of 1st September, was on top of the world, was regarded very highly and was adored, in less than 60 days, came from that very high level to the lowest level, to being the court which again raised another history, not being able to raise a quorum. I'd have thought that in fairness, because the petitioners who had petitioned and who had to be heard on 25th of October are also one of the petitioners here, what the judges ought to have done was to start by apologizing to them, explaining why they could not raise quorum on 25th and why now they are fully quorate. But that's one. Two, in this space of time, there has been clear intimidation of the judges. The president is on record as calling the entire bench thugs. He is on record as saying that they are going to teach the Chief Justice a lesson. In this space of time, three, the Chief Justice has done what Chief Justices don't do. He has called a press conference to say that the judiciary, and especially the Supreme Court, are under threat, and called on citizens, not the executive, not the government, but on citizens to protect them. That is a cry of desperation. In this space of time, the Deputy Chief Justice has suffered the misfortune of having his guard shot, and it is speculative as to whether they were aiming at her or they were aiming to teach her a lesson. The situation, therefore, is the judges there's been every effort to intimidate the Supreme Court. Whether that intimidation has worked or not, we are yet to tell. But I'm seeing telltale signs that suggest it has worked. And one of them is the failure to raise the quorum. Whether the Supreme Court now can gather the courage that they had in August to nullify an election is a vexed question that will for now remain an open one.
But for you, if it's nothing more than an annulment for you to say that they haven't been compromised or intimidated, unless it's annulled.
I fear that there's a good chance we may have gone full circle. You remember in 2007, when the results were announced and Mwai Kibaki was announced president, Raila Amollo Odinga refused to challenge the decision in court because he believed that the courts were compromised and it led to disastrous consequences. When we were appointed to work on the Constitution, and by the way, this is not bragging, I am the one who brought the idea, which has not really been, we didn't borrow it from any country. I suggested to my colleagues that the only way we can bring legitimacy to the courts is to have the highest court, the Supreme Court, hear the petitions on presidential elections directly. That we did not get from any other jurisdiction. And I'm happy to say that it worked. That is why in 2013, there was a challenge in court, and it was accepted. That is why in August, there was a challenge in court, and it was accepted. My fear is that if, as I sometimes fear, the intimidation on the Supreme Court may have succeeded, then we are going full circle, where nobody, at any rate, not the main challengers, will be interested in challenging the presidential elections in the Supreme Court, and we'll be back where we were 10 years ago, and it's a disaster.
And don't you think there's Supreme Court fatigue on top of all this? It's been a really tiring year. You don't think there's enough fatigue?
I think there's enough fatigue, not just on the Supreme Court, but even on the citizens. But this is like a sprint. When you go for sprint, and it's a 100-meter race, there are certain rules that must apply. And they must tell you, you must be behind the line, your knee must be on the ground, and you only take off once you hear the shot. If anyone takes off before the first time, the second time, the third time, you will not say that now we are tired of restarting. Let whoever started ahead win the race. You don't do that. We will repeat, and we ought to repeat these elections for as many times as it will take IEBC to comply with the Constitution, with the law, and with the expectations of legitimate, fair and credible elections.
Okay, let me use your same analogy, and you're saying all these runners are at the start, knees on the ground, waiting for the gun to go off.
Yes.
One of the players suddenly says, you know what, this guy is wearing better shoes than me. Let's all get the same shoes. And then he says, oh wait, this guy, he just, he looks like he's faster than me. Let me get a head start. You can't change the rules when you're already, in the race.
Those are not the rules, Jeff. And that would not be a reason to restart the race. You restart the race because you realize that while you're supposed to be on the same line, there's one person who's 1 meter ahead. Okay? Mm-hmm. You restart the race by saying that if you are to sprint at the same time and you are to take off with the same rules, you don't give somebody spikes and you tell the other one you'll run barefoot. You see? Mm-hmm. Now, those are the issues. The issues that have been raised have been legitimate issues about equity and equality, about equal treatment and fairness. The unfortunate thing, I think that while we agreed to reconstitute the IEBC, we did not agree on the fundamental rules of engagement as to who to get there. I was the ombudsman at the time, and I made submissions to the joint parliamentary team, and I told them this. I told them one of the things we need to do is we need to constitute an IEBC that will be transitional, not permanent for the 6 years. Let us agree that we've not been able to get it right for some time, and let us agree that there are imminent and, undying suspicions in this country. So let's do this. Let's do what we did when we were writing the Constitution. We were 9 of us. There were 3 internationals. Let us do what we did when we called Kriegler. There were some Kenyans and some non-Kenyans. Yeah. Let us do what we did when Kofi Annan and the team were here. Let us call in some internationals. Let us agree not necessarily to reduce the number, let it be 9, but let's have at least 3 internationals, one of whom will be the chair.
Of the IBC?
Of the IBC.
International?
International.
A foreigner?
A foreigner. And let the vice chair also be a foreigner. And let us make sure that they are experts, first in law, they are experts on elections, they are persons of unquestionable integrity. And let us do this election as an example.
That's because we are very ethnic as a country and we need non-partisan people? Or?
We are ethnic and we must accept that. The moment somebody hears Amollo, the moment somebody hears Koinange,
they know right away.
Yes, they've already made conclusions in your favor or against you. Secondly, we must accept that we keep not getting it right in terms of elections. So we need elections experts. So far, we've only insisted on legal experts. You can know the law, but you might not know elections, laws, and elections practice. So if we could do that, then we would get these elections right at least once. Then now we can go back. But I was told that I was wrong, that they asked me, whatever happened to patriotism? How can you accept that there are over 40 million Kenyans, you cannot get a Kenyan who can run the election? I think with the debacle we keep seeing, I think I was right. And I would still insist on that. Chebukati is a good man, and I've known him for some years, but he's unable to do this job.
But everyone did accept Chebukati and Chiloba, both of whom come from Trans Nzoia, by the way, come from the same place. And everybody accepted them in the beginning.
Well, first of all, it's not that everybody accepted Chiloba. You must know that Chiloba was brought in the previous IEBC. But at that time, what had to be dealt with were the commissioners. Because what the Constitution protects are commissioners, not the CEO. The CEO can be fired at any time. So they did not need to concentrate on the CEO. It was the job of the commissioners, once they come in, to determine whether they want to work with that CEO or not. But secondly, and that's the point I'm making, you must remember that even in giving Chebukati the job, there were others, admittedly. He was not ranked first, second, or third. But we could not get those ones for the reasons I'm saying, because of the ethnic suspicions.
Right.
So you had to go for a person who's acceptable in terms of ethnicity and region, not in terms of merit. Now, if it was an international, then those issues would not arise. And that's why I think that we needed to have focus on it. So what we did is that we focused on the need to change the commissioners. But we did not sufficiently focus on how to get appropriate people. And the second thing about it, this idea of parliamentary approval is a good thing, but it can be a very bad thing when parliament is held captive. I'm a member of parliament, and I can tell you this for a fact. When we wrote the constitution, we decongested power from the presidency, and we said, let us distribute it. Some of it, especially in terms of appointments, went to parliament. Some of it went to independent commissions. Some of it went to devolved units. But when then you have a parliament that is captive to the executive, then you end up doing nothing.
You talk about a majority.
Yes, a majority that does not question as long as it is indicated by the presidency, by the executive, that go this way. And therefore, the parliamentary approval becomes an extension of executive power. And it has not, therefore, worked in this current situation.
Real quick, if Chebukati does not resign after all of this, would you push for his resignation and the reconstitution of the IEBC?
I think what we need to push for clearly is now more fundamental than even than the resignation of the individual. It is clear that the elections infrastructure must be re-examined. It is clear that the influence of the executive in terms of procurement of election materials must be shielded and must be re-examined. And it is also clear that the timelines that they are given to operate with must be readjusted also.
Okay, I want to take a break, come back and ask you this question. Actually, it's George Ombwak who's asking, what is the People's Assembly? He wants to know that. And also, Siaya Senator James Orengo said that they are going to swear in Raila Amollo Odinga in the next couple of weeks. Is that legal?
Do you want me to answer
no,
when we
hold
come
that
back?
thought. Okay. When we come back, keep tweeting at Amollo, at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is JKLive. We're talking one-on-one with Senior Counsel and Rarieda Member of Parliament, Amollo Otiende. JKL takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.